the government has decided to accept a law-commissioned recommendation to decriminalize suicide. Whilst many or most approve of this decision, there are those who disagree, whilst others continue to see suicide as a sin. So in part 2, we discuss, has the time come for modern India to comprehensively change the way it views suicide? But first, in part 1, are Indian industrialists becoming disenchanted with the Modi government's attitude to economic reform? The lead front page story in yesterday's Economic Times said that at a closed-door CII meeting, top industrialists expressed concern. They feel the government is not being bold. So tonight we ask, is that the case? How widespread is this concern? And why is the government moving slowly? That's the first discussion tonight. And now joining me to discuss the Modi government's approach to economic reforms is the chairperson and managing director of Biocon Limited, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, the former Secretary General of FICCI and a renowned economist himself, Rajiv Kumar, the chief India economist at JP Morgan, Sajid Chinoy, and the well-known CEO, author and columnist, Gurcharan Das. Mrs. Shaw, yesterday the lead front page story in the Economic Times was about how top industrialists at a closed CII meeting voiced concern that the Modi government is not pursuing economic reforms boldly enough. The paper's headline was, "After Euphoria, India Inc. starts worrying about Modi Sarkar." You were present at that meeting. Explain to me why people believe or think that the Modi government is not bold.
Is that for me, Karan?
Yes, indeed, Mrs. Shaw.
I think there is...
So, you know, I think
Mrs. Shaw,
Mrs. Shaw, we define reform.
Mrs. Shaw, that's for Mrs. Shaw.
Narrow definition
no,
of
that's
reform.
for Mrs. Shaw. Sajid, I'll come to you in a moment's time. Mrs. Shaw?
Yeah. So, Karan, I just want to start by saying I think there is strong political will to bring in bold reforms. But I do believe that there is a huge deficit in terms of bureaucratic will. And there again, I want to say that there is good alignment at the top. But where we have the problem is all the layers below the top. That's where I find that the bureaucrats who have to deliver change are very resistant to change. I think that's where our problem is, because they feel that the importance of their roles and jobs are threatened, and they simply don't want simplification of rules. They do not want faster regulatory approvals, and this is where we have to, change the rules of the game. And this is where the government has to somehow get everyone aligned with what they want to do.
So are you saying to me that in fact the resistance from the bureaucratic levels is actually thwarting Mr. Modi's desire for bold reforms?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, that there's good alignment between the top bureaucrats and the ministers. But I think where the problem lies is the layers below them.
Okay.
Because I think these are people who feel threatened, and they are the ones who want to be the ones reading ambiguous rules and interpreting them for their top bosses. And unfortunately, we rely very much on this cadre of bureaucrats to deliver change. And they are simply not prepared to accept that radical reform and pace of change that we are all looking for.
Now, Sajid Chinoy, many people say that there's a marked difference between how Mr. Modi handles the political challenges he faces and how he responds to the economic challenges. Maharashtra and Haryana have shown that in terms of political challenges, he's bold, decisive, courageous. Often he takes risks. But on the economic front, when it comes to economic reforms, he seems to be cautious, incremental. He's looking for consensus before he acts. Do you agree with that view of Mr. Modi?
Karan, the audio is not very clear, so I think I heard your question is for me.
It is indeed. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I think, we need to be careful how we define reform. Reform in this country is often associated narrowly with legislative changes, insurance reform, GST reform. But really, if you go back to what the growth slowdown in India is all about, it's been implementation bottlenecks on the ground. It's been environmental clearances, no regulatory policy for coal, bureaucratic risk aversion, a lack of coordination. And every indication is on those implementation bottlenecks, the government's making slow and steady progress. We now have a coal regulatory policy. There is a recognition that the land acquisition bill needs to be amended. There's a sense that environmental clearances must be rationalized. So A, I think we need to be patient. And B, there is a message here over the last 3 years. Which are the reforms that have succeeded and which are the reforms that have failed? Incremental economic reform has actually, by spreading out adjustment costs, has actually succeeded. Take the example of diesel prices. Diesel prices couldn't go up for many years, but by moving at 1% a month, for 1.5 years, diesel prices went up. In contrast, look at FDI and multi-brand retail. A big bang announcement, it caused vested interests to come together, and the reform got shot down. So I think the lesson from the last 2-3 years is incrementalism, while it may not make for good headlines or may not excite markets, is a more politically pragmatic way to go about things. And the last point I'll make is all of what we're talking about now, are the next generation of reforms. It's labor, it's land, it's energy pricing, which are on the concurrent list of the Constitution, which require a lot of cooperation from the states and therefore are not amenable to big policy changes at the center. This is going to be a long, hard slog. The government's made a good start. I think we just need to be patient.
I'm going to concentrate, Rajiv Kumar, on those big bang second generation reforms, because the truth is many industrialists and many economists were hoping for decisive changes in terms of land acquisition, in terms of retrospective taxation, in terms of labor, and there nothing much has happened. No doubt Mr. Jaitley at seminars and forums has talked about it. No doubt he said it will happen, but he hasn't set a deadline, and he doesn't seem to indicate whether this will happen quickly or not. What is holding the government back? Because clearly they know industry wants it, economists want it. What's holding the government back?
Karan, what's holding the government back are three things. One, as Mr. Modi himself said, he has inherited a broken governance system, and he has to get that right. He has to set that right. Turf wars, interministerial lack of coordination, etc. The second thing that is holding him back is within his own party, within his own parivar, he's got people, he's got groups which are not clear about the direction of reforms, which quite actively oppose reforms very often. And they would try to do Swadeshi, they're not clear about FDI, and so on and so forth. And the third thing is that a lot of these reforms, a lot of these steps will have to be taken by the state governments. For example, the GST. He can't go ahead with the GST unless the states are on board. So those are the things that are holding him back. But what I wanted to say is that this government also would not like to cede space to the opposition for a populist-based opposition in the field. Now, there used to be an understanding that some reforms can be done up front, because by the time the next political election comes along, you are sort of home and dry. But our electoral cycle has now become such, with the state elections, etc., that no government would want to cede that political space. So therefore, the agenda of the reform would follow the political timing of the government, and not, and I'm afraid not that of the industrialists, the big business, or the economists. That is the only way he can ensure that he will succeed.
Gurcharan Das, you've heard Rajiv Kumar argue that the agenda of reforms will be in line with the political cycle. That may make sense to a domestic audience, and we in India may understand the political compulsions either of the Sangh Parivar not liking the reforms or of constant elections not permitting Mr. Modi to be bold. But how do foreign investors view this? You're in touch with them very often. Are they understanding of this? Or are they becoming impatient because they expected quick change? 6 months have passed and they don't see it happening.
Well, I don't think there's such a great difference between the perceptions of the two. Modi, we have to remember, is not an ideological reformer in the mold of Margaret Thatcher. He's more of what I call a modernizer, like the East Asian leaders, and so he's a pragmatic reformer. And he said that if you're going to be around for 10 years, you don't want the unions out in the streets in the first 6 months. So I personally think, I agree with Mr. Chinoy, that there have been a lot of small incremental things. The big thing where my disappointment has been is that I would have, for example, on taxation, announced the abrogation of the 2000 law, that we would have announced that we are going to repeal that law. I would have made bigger moves on land acquisition. I would have made bigger moves on recapitalization of the banks. These are areas which we are behind. But there's a lot actually that there's been done. In fact, you know, it's correct what he says, that it is not the, it's the red tape that blocks India much more than the big reformist things. And if you know about this digital portal, that one window digital portal that they are creating, that will go a long way. And if they succeed, I think India's rank, you know, the way to judge Modi's performance will be if India's rank does improve on the ease of doing business. That will be the single biggest contribution.
Kiran Mazumdar Shah, I want to take up this argument made in a sense both by Rajiv Kumar and Gurcharan Das, that Mr. Modi must go incrementally, either because the constant election cycle and the opposition from within the Sangh Parivar won't let him move faster, or as Gurcharan Das said, he has to go slowly because he doesn't want the unions out on the streets. The opposite view, and that's the one I want to put to you, is that when a government has 282, and for the first time in 30 years a clear majority on its own, it has enormous political capital. That capital can be used in the early stages to push difficult reforms. But if you don't use it, A, it simply gets frittered away with time, and B, unexpected problems start to hit you. And already in the last 2 weeks, this government has been seriously hit, first by Sadhavi saying stupid things, and now by the Sangh Parivar launching conversion campaigns that are going to infuriate the opposition. And Modi's political capital is going to steadily get frittered away and not get used to push reforms. How do you respond to this opposite view?
Well, you know, personally, I believe that there are some very, very doable economic reforms which can be bold. For instance, we all talk about infrastructure projects, which of course depends a lot on land acquisition and getting the PPP model radically changed so that there is trust on both sides. I also believe that, you know, there is much to be done on the coal power sector, which is being done. And I'm pleased to see this morning that, the coal ministry has actually decided to provide immunity to its bureaucracy in terms of probing by CBI and CAG, hoping that they will be able to take bold decisions in their coal allocation. And moreover, I think they want to make it very transparent, which again I think one of the panelists mentioned, that I think we do need to get into online transparency. So I think there's a lot that can be done very rapidly.
But what about my question, that when you have 282, you can afford to be bold, you've got capital that you can use, and if you don't use it, it'll get frittered away, as is happening now, over controversies to do with conversion or silly Sadhavis.
No, I agree with you, Karan. I think we do need to take some bold reforms which won't be what they call politically incorrect, like someone was suggesting that if you suddenly go into big bang kind of labor reforms and finds the unions out on the streets, you don't want to tackle it that way. But then on the other hand, there are investment reforms that you can actually speed up, which is not being done at the speed it should. I think you have to basically
take up that point for me, Rajiv Kumar. There are many other things that could happen that will not get the unions out on the streets. Your great concern is that Mr. Modi doesn't want political backlashes, but there's a lot he can do that won't invite a backlash, and even that isn't happening. Are you therefore disappointed that the doables are not being done fast enough? Rajiv Kumar?
Yeah, there is a little bit of a disappointment in the sense that there was some reform that you mentioned, for example, the elimination of the retrospective tax, the sort of rectifying the entire transfer pricing, situation, the mess that we have created there, a better compliance on the, direct taxes, etc., which could have been done. But let's also remember, Karan, that any reform that you want to do takes a lot of preparation. Now, for example, I know that in the Department of Industrial Policies and Promotion, there's a huge amount of work that is going on now to try and reduce the number of licenses and clearances, create a single window, improve the business environment. But that will take time before it can be rolled out. So I think the impatience that is shown very often by the big business and some economists who sometimes are those who are stationed abroad, so they are not maybe sometimes in sync with what's happening on the ground, is because the actual situation, the interplay of the politics, social and economics, which is what India is all about, is not understood as well, and therefore the capability of the system to undertake these reforms is, I believe, a more complex issue to understand than simply talking about why not do the executive action and why not move faster.
Sajid Chinoy, I want to put that particular answer that you've heard from Rajiv Kumar to you. He's saying that there's a particular interplay of society, of economics, of politics, and that inhibits reform happening quickly. But that to me suggests that Mr. Modi is a prisoner of a system that won't let him move fast. But we elected him to change the system and break it. If he is not going to break the system and take risks to break the system, but only respond to the extent the system will let him, then he becomes as much a prisoner as UPA was, and all he's doing that's better than UPA's faster decision, quicker implementation. That's not what people elected him for. Surely that's where people will feel disappointed, won't they, Sajid Chinoy?
Karan, I think the people who are disappointed are simply disappointed because they're a victim of their own expectations. A couple of things. I think, A, let's not downplay the efficacy of implementation bottlenecks. We've done a lot of empirical work. Almost 45% of India's GDP slowdown in the last 5 years is because of these bottlenecks on the ground. So if your focus is to jumpstart growth in the next 6 or 8 quarters, it's not going to happen by passing an insurance bill in Parliament or a GST bill that's going to have an impact after 5 years. It's the bread and butter of how the public sector interacts with the private sector. Now, as regards as being a hostage of the environment, it's very early days. Think back to Margaret Thatcher, think back to Ronald Reagan. It took them a year and a half to begin to change the system. So far, let's look at what's actually happened. The government's found a way to have a coal regulatory policy. They've created a legal framework where you may have commercial coal mining. Several states have begun to amend labor laws, which is, is a massive change from the past. In this session of Parliament, it's very likely the insurance bill will be passed. We're getting closer and closer to a GST bill. You have an Expenditure Management Commission that comes back on December 31st with suggestions that hopefully will be in the next budget. You've got financial sector reforms that will be introduced in the next session of Parliament. If you look at all the little things that have happened, and forget about the big headlines, substantial progress has been made on meaningful elements of policy that will have an impact in the next 4-6 quarters. So I think any assessment that he's a prisoner is premature.
The opposite view, Gurcharan Das, to what you've heard from Mr. Chinoy, is that actually many of those bills that he mentioned, insurance, coal, GST, are now under serious threat as of the last 24 hours. Congress is making it clear that insurance and coal may not pass in this session. They may deliberately hold it back till the budget session. And today we now know that the states are rejecting GST. Now, if those three downsides actually materialize, how bad, how disappointing a message, Gurcharan Das, will that send out?
Well, Karan, let's look at the results in these 6 months.
But first, answer my question. Answer my question before you go on to the results.
I am answering your question. We elected Modi for 3 reasons. We elected him to control inflation. We elected him to bring back jobs. We elected him to stop corruption. Now, maybe he's lucky, but the country has controlled inflation.
Well,
there has
oil
been
prices did that for him. He didn't do very much himself.
6 months.
Let's be honest.
Now, jobs,
oil prices did that for him, and commodity prices.
Smart businessmen know that there's an investment cycle. We are coming out of a terrible legacy of the last government. So there is a time, there's confidence. Confidence leads to investment. Investment leads to production, and production leads to growth. and jobs.
Can I stop you? Can I stop you?
You know, one
because
can't
the
be
Economic
impatient.
Times article actually began by saying that many of the industrialists who met behind closed doors at CII were actually not thinking of investing and worried about the situation in India. Are you saying that that report, based on a whole lot of CII top industrialists, is fallacious? Because you're taking a very different line.
No, I don't think it's fallacious. Yes, I don't think the report is fallacious. I think those people really are getting unnecessarily impatient. There is a business cycle, and smart people know that.
Okay.
The ones in that room maybe were not that smart.
Well, I think that's unfair because Kiran Shaw was one of those. Kiran Shaw, I want to go back to you. The Economic Times article quotes GVK Power and Infrastructure Vice Chairman Sanjay Reddy to say that euphoria and hope is waning. Was that a commonly shared sentiment at that meeting? Because you were there.
No, I don't think that was shared as an ethos across the room, because there may be certain sectors. But I think what is important for us is to understand that, you know, Mr. Modi is as impatient as we are to see change. And I think we need to, of course, give him maybe a little more time. But I worry about the fact that unless we really get a buy-in from all levels of the bureaucracy to drive change, we will again see very small incremental reforms. Now, for instance, if we really go by what Prime Minister Modi is saying, just 1 minute. If we go by,
I want to interrupt.
Can I just say one thing?
Let me put this to you. You know, you're saying that unless we get a buy-in from the bureaucracy, we won't see big, meaningful change. But this is a Prime Minister who has no problem asking bureaucrats to speak directly to him, to email him directly. He has no problem getting bureaucrats to turn up to work on time. How come he can't get lower level bureaucrats to do what he wants? How come they become an obstacle to the change he believes is critical for the economy? Does it really work?
Well, you know, as we all know, Karan, there is a kind of a multi-layered system that we have to deal with. And I think I mentioned to you that while the top bureaucrats are well aligned with the Prime Minister's vision, that has not percolated down the system. Now, for instance, if we talk about simplification of rules, if we talk about doing away with a number of unnecessary regulations, if we talk about expeditious regulatory approvals, now I think this requires a complete rewriting of our current acts and rules and regulations. Okay. It's going to take time. You know, how are we going to deal with that? So I think you need the lower bureaucrats to be dealing with that, and they are simply resisting change. So we need to do something very, very radical. Maybe we need to outsource some of this work to expedite this whole rewriting of all the acts.
Rajiv Kumar, I want to come back to what is coming through as a common theme from both Mrs. Shaw and you, and partly at least from Gurcharan Das, that Mr. Modi is unable to break free of the compulsions of either the political cycle or, as you put it, the opposition from within the Sangh Parivar, or as Mrs. Shaw put it, the opposition or the resistance of lower level bureaucrats. And the impression you get is that here's a man who knows that reform is needed. He knows that without those critical second generation reforms, 8% growth won't happen. And yet he's helpless against the bottlenecks of either his own parivar or lower level bureaucrats or the political cycle. And it seems as if he's a man who knows what's needed but can't act.
Yeah, Karan, I think you are absolutely right. He knows what he needs, but he's trying to find his way forward in the system that he's got into, and he's coming to Delhi, you know, in some sense for the first time. And I think there are two things that he's going to do, which is one, that he will have to make a case for reform. I think he's very clear, but he's understood that he has to sell these reforms to the public. For example, the insurance bill, if it is blocked by the Congress, Mr. Modi would do well to take it up in his Mann Ki Baat program and tell the people how what the Congress has done is not good for the country. And that is the first step that he needs to take. It is to get the people to support him for the reform agenda, which has never been done in the past in this country. The second, I think he will realize very soon that the bureaucracy is rather deficit in talent. And that has been now, there is a lot of evidence to say that, that this bureaucracy is not the same as you had in the earlier years. Because remember that people who are at the top in this bureaucracy have have joined the government in 1980s, latter half of 1980s, by which time the political class had in fact taken control. So they are not the same decisive decision-making people who were the ICS and the senior IAS officers. So Mr. Modi will therefore have to bring in, and I'm sure he will do that, the talent from outside to push and design his agenda for reforms, which is what is needed today as the way forward. So he knows what he has to do, but he has to get the instruments and the modalities now and the people's support for being able to push that forward. And the time is now very critical.
Absolutely.
Between now and the budget and just a month ahead, that is the critical time, because otherwise the benefit of the doubt that he is enjoying will, I'm afraid, slip away quite quickly. But those are the two things that I would put to him for his consideration.
Sajid Chenoy, I want to come back to that last thought from Rajiv Kumar, that in fact the next budget is the critical deadline. Now, the Indian-American scholar Ashley Tellis, writing about the American CEOs that Mr. Modi had met when he'd gone across in September, said that they were prepared to wait till the next budget for the major structural second-generation reforms. But if they didn't happen with the budget, then they would say that if a man with Mr. Modi's mandate can't change the system, then the Indian system's never going to change, and they would take their investment elsewhere. Do you accept that the next budget is a critical deadline for Mr. Modi, and if he can't deliver by then disillusionment will set in?